Hi there, this is Elise Bennin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. Does this ever happen to you? Your email inbox is overflowing, but sometimes there's one email newsletter that stands out. It's just so good that you have to stop and read it, and it's usually a long one. And then you have to find someone to share it with or find a way to share it with everyone. I don't know, maybe I'm just a weird marketer, but this happened to me recently, and that is exactly how I felt when I got impact reports in the wild. That was the subject line of my client, Kate Purcell's recent issue. Now, lucky for me and for you, I have a podcast, which is a great way to share this kind of thing. So I invited Kate onto the podcast to talk about her marketing strategy and her content marketing and how she, as a designer, manages to write content that really resonates and stands out. But first, I'm going to read to you her newsletter aloud because I can. So listen and learn. Okay, here is Kate's newsletter. Her company is called KP Creative Strategy. She sends out a monthly newsletter to a couple hundred people. And the subject line was Impact Reports in the Wild. The internet is a chaotic jungle. Your impact report? It's a small, quiet thing trying to make itself heard above the roar. Imagine your audience is a little monkey darting through a digital jungle of distractions. Every second, her attention jerks from food to danger to the next shiny thing. She's not sipping tea, savoring your carefully crafted prose. She's racing, skimming, scanning, if she even clicks at all. Now let's step back to the relatively controlled environment of you sitting in front of your computer, contemplating this year's impact report. When my clients finally get the chance to reflect on this important task, they do it with a lot of intention. After spending the year collecting data and stories, they sit down to write. They think carefully about the flow. They create a narrative arc. They craft an outline, and then they weave it all together. It's a beautiful thing. But the way it's written is not the way it's read. Back in the jungle, here's the monkey. When she clicks on that link in an email newsletter, she's not settling in with a cup of tea to savor it cover to cover. She's a wild animal racing around haphazardly. She sniffs this section for a second, runs over there, circles back. She's madly scanning, scrolling, jumping around, looking for something interesting to land on. Her eyeballs are moving a mile a minute. And that's if she even clicked in the first place. You are competing with literally everything. The reality is that your impact report is competing with every single other piece of information out there. Your most thoughtfully written case for support is up against a vacation photo, a viral video, a text about dinner, and a doom scroll through political headlines. Your real competition isn't the other organization doing what you're doing, it's the entire internet. If you haven't heard it, go listen to Welcome to the Internet by Bo Burnham. It nails this feeling. Could I interest you in everything, all of the time? When I listened to this while writing this article, it made me both laugh and cry before the song ended. We live in such an amazing and difficult time. No one is reading from beginning to end. Okay, it's Tuesday morning. You gather what remains of your attention and focus and pour it into this most important piece of comms. You write something thoughtful and cohesive. But here's the question. How many people start at the beginning and scroll through to the end, let alone read it in that order? I would venture to say 0%. If your audience is anything like me, they're zooming through the document or web page first to get a sense of how long it is and whether it's worth their time, assuming you've captured their attention in the first place. If something sparks curiosity, they might slow down, skim more deliberately, look for a headline that draws them in. Maybe they'll read a story or two. One page, one point. In this context, each page or section of a website has to stand on its own. Take the Tony's Chocolonely excellent impact report, which she links to, and I will link to it. Each page makes one, maybe two clear points. Their data is paired with visuals. There's a lot of simplicity, and that simplicity requires real discipline. It means cutting a lot of things that feel important. It means using bold visuals. It means stating big, important things clearly and succinctly. This is the hook, not the whole story. You are not writing a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. No one is going to stick around because their friend told them it gets good after the first chapter. You have to get out of your own head. You have to be clear-eyed about the people coming into contact with your comms and their reality. I also want to make a point here about space. I'm not advocating for more of an insane speed of memes and video reels. Your readers actually do care, despite the world that's trying to steal their attention. Offering them respite, a place to rest their weary eyeballs and consider what you're saying is a gift. They are humans, and this world is asking a lot of them right now. Make it emotional. Reporting tends to be dry and factual, but for most of the orgs I work with, the impact report is their big chance each year to make the case for why someone should invest their precious time, energy, and money in them. So please appeal to people's hearts. Remind them why they care in the first place. You're not writing for a boardroom full of men smoking cigars, making decisions based on astounding impact numbers. You're writing for people who've opened the news recently and feel like the world is burning. This looks like, and this is a bulleted list, defining the problem clearly. Don't assume they remember because they probably don't. Telling stories and using design to call out compelling points. Highlighting why this matters now, using visuals that say in 1 second what 300 words couldn't. So, as you gather content for your next impact report, try to get out of your own way. Remember what you're up against. Step out of your shoes. Test it on your kids, your parents, your mechanic. That little jungle monkey just might stop and stay a while. All right, Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Elise.
So glad you're here. Please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Kate Purcell, and I have a small company, KP Creative Strategy. So I'm a creative strategist and visual designer working with social impact organizations. And so that's nonprofits, foundations, social enterprises, like you might think about B Corps. And in the last while, I've really been leaning into focusing on helping them communicate their impact. And many times that comes up around impact reports. And I do a lot of web work as well. So that's both digital and print.
Beautiful. How long have you been in business?
Gosh, since 2013. So at this point, that would be 12 years almost.
How's it going?
It's going well. I mean, it's been a long journey. And, I say that I was in business since 2013, but I really was kind of just freelancing. And when I finally decided to call you like 5 years ago, I feel that was a moment where I was like, my business really started in terms of me saying, okay, I'm going to take this seriously rather than just kind of saying, oh, I have some work and I'll just do that work.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am finding with a lot of people, there is and there needs to be a moment where you decide to take it more seriously, to be more professional about it, to treat it as a business as opposed to quote unquote what people think of as freelancing. It's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is interesting to think about that too, because as I've been thinking about growing, I mean, that's a word I kind of put in quotes because I think for a lot of people, at least that I talk to, seem to define that by like hiring people and having a bigger team and more revenue. But I guess, I would say for me, a lot of the growth has been in how I'm approaching it. and being intentional about setting goals and trying to think towards the future. I mean, freelancing was great, but it really was more, and you say this, like a more reactive kind of, I'll do some stuff because some people asked me to, rather than setting intentions and trying to move in a direction.
Yeah. And I often talk about it also. The distinction I make is taking whatever comes along versus
Sure.
going after, pursuing the work that you want.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, like, my whole career has been very much like following the threads of what is presenting itself to me, which I do like living that way. And so it really, in some ways, it was hard for me to say, no, I'm going to take this seriously, because I didn't want to have to plan too much. But what I found is that it's actually just a really small shift in how I approach it, because
Hmm.
I still really follow what's in front of me and what's presenting itself to me. It's just that I'm putting some more intentionality into that.
Yeah. And that's what I call listening to the market, basically, right? There's a
Yeah.
difference between just taking whatever comes along, which a lot of people call word of mouth, and saying, oh, this is what's coming my way. Let me build on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about it a lot recently when you and I were talking about outreach, because it's not something I've done much of. And in my mind, it was okay. So, like, let's say you have these two extremes, right? One of them is just like living in the moment, flowing with whatever's happening. You're a freelancer, you're a hairdresser, whatever somebody wants you to do, you're doing it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's like you set your plan for the year and you use those time blocking techniques at every single moment of your day is planned out, and you set your goals, right? Like, those are kind of two extremes.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the more tight one is what I feel I should be doing in business. And so when I started doing outreach, I was being really prescriptive about it. Like, Elise says you have to do it like this, I'm going to do it like this. And it was not very fun. Um, and so then I was reminded of, so then, when you and I were chatting, I realized, like, no, there's a way to do this that, one, is responsive to what people are interested in, and two, is just more fun because of
Hmm.
that. Yeah. So I guess it's like approaching my business strategy, if you will, or planning or goal setting in a way that doesn't feel like I'm putting myself in a prison, but also
Hmm.
is responsive.
Yeah. And, we've talked a lot about your marketing intuition because you're a very intuitive person and you're intuitive with your clients and with your work. And I'm trying to teach people how to be intuitive with their marketing as well. And so, even though so many people are looking for that prescription, right? That formula, just give me the formula and okay, yeah, I'll give it to you. But you really are going to have to adapt it to
Right.
yourself so that you'll do it.
Yeah. And I mean, people are really different, like, I am definitely somebody who, if I have too much structure, I just rebel against it.
Yeah.
I made the structure for my own self.
Yep. You're not alone. That's for sure. I can tell
Yeah.
you that a lot of the people I work with are that way. And maybe one little fact that we can put out there, because I think it's kind of relevant to what you're doing before we get into which of the tools you're using is seems to me one of your goals and part of this intentional marketing is to have the freedom that you want. And right now you live on a boat, right?
Yes, I do.
Talk about freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been working remotely for a while, and we finally decided to cash in the chips, and we left our home, and it's been almost 2 years that we've been sailing around the Caribbean, hopping from island to island, and I've been working the whole time. So that's been very freeing.
Yeah, I'm sure that works. Excellent. All right. So, as you've been working remotely, and as you and I have been working together over the last 5 years, and just building your marketing machine, as I like to call it, tell us which of the tools you use and a little bit about how you use them.
And I should just chime in here. I don't think we talked about this before, but you said marketing machine, but I think I told you that I recently made a little stuffed animal with my daughter to represent
That's
the,
right.
because I really loved the idea that the business is sort of an entity outside of myself. And you always say you have to take care of your business and it will take care of you. So we made this little stuffed animal, and her name is Kalmita, and she sits right next to my computer. And anyway, I just thought of that when you said machine, because I really do think about it as like a persona, like a little thing that I'm caring for.
I love that. I love that she's called Kalmita. We'll definitely put a picture of her in the companion blog post that goes along with this podcast.
Okay, so the three tools that Kalmita quietly sits and watches me perform. So content marketing, in fact, I would say content marketing has been such a gift since I started working with you, because I started my newsletter shortly after we initially talked. And I've never considered myself a writer, with a capital W. And I probably would have said to many people like, "Oh, I don't write." But I loved doing it. I started a monthly newsletter, and I've been pretty consistent for many years now, which sort of surprises me. But I've just found it a really lovely way to think and go deeper with my own connection to the work I do. And it's been a really great opportunity also to talk to people. Sometimes I've lately been interviewing people for writing content, which has again been like a really great opportunity to, yeah, just kind of generate new ideas and go deeper. So it's really been more than just a marketing tool. And I kind of love it.
That's awesome. I love that you love it. And we're going to talk more about your content marketing and especially about your most recent newsletter, which I just absolutely love and can't wait to read aloud to the listeners. But let's go around to the other tools from the Simplest Marketing Plan, the networking and the outreach. How, if at all, are you using those also?
So networking, I mean, I did networking on and off for many years, probably in the wrong places, a lot of in-person networking. But I've really focused in the past several years on a larger network, the Communications Network, which is for mostly nonprofits and foundations. And that's been awesome. I've met a lot of really great people and clients in that network, and it's almost entirely digital. Went to a couple conferences, but I mean, not digital, but online. And then there's a couple other groups that I'm a part of, and actually it's all online, which I'm finding, especially now, traveling on the boat, I'm missing those in-person relationships more. And so
Yeah.
it's been a nice way to do online networking as a way to connect to people for sure.
Mhm.
And it also really has expanded the horizons for me in terms of like clients that are possible across the country.
Yeah. And I know that later this year in the fall, you have a couple of in person events that you are planning to attend as well.
That's right. Yes.
So that'll be good. All right. So that's strategic networking. And you mentioned outreach, that it isn't something you haven't done much of, but you're wading into that pond, as it were. Just tell us where you are with that.
Yeah. So, I alluded to it earlier, but I started kind of with this prescriptive, the tools you gave me, I started doing them. But then I noticed that there were certain things that people, especially on LinkedIn, and I should say, really, it's at this point all on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
So there were just certain things that were getting traction, and I started reaching out to people that I didn't know, which is essentially, I guess, what outreach is, right? It's like the step past networking where you're like, okay, I don't know these people, reach out, see if they want to have a conversation. And I mean, somewhat surprising, people really did seem to want to. And so I am dipping my toe in that now. And it's fun. I mean, I feel like I'm meeting new people and having interesting conversations.
Again, I love that. And also, I remember now that for a long time, you said, I hate LinkedIn. I really don't want to be on LinkedIn. I hate LinkedIn. It sounds like you don't feel quite as strongly about that
Well, I guess
anymore.
it's like so many of these tools, it's like the relationship that I have with it sometimes. So when I go through the feed, that's when I start to feel like I do not like this.
Mm.
I don't like being presented with all these ideas. But when I'm able to actually just find people who are doing interesting things and then reach out to them and say, "Do you want to talk?" And then we talk, then it's amazing. It's an amazing tool. So maybe what I mean is like and I still do not like the LinkedIn feed, nor do I try not to get too wrapped up in like posting something and what do people think of it, and really use it as a tool.
Yeah, and actually, what I hear in there also is the same distinction we were making before, which is that when you go to the feed, you're basically receiving whatever they give you, whatever they, what is that? There's a word they use, present to you or put in front of your face, which you have no control over, versus very intentionally choosing the people, the organizations that you feel strongly about, enthusiastic about, and want to help, and then taking the steps of reaching out to them, basically, in a human way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And they're responding positively. So that's
It
a good
takes some
thing.
self-discipline, though, I will
Yes,
say.
for sure. All of it does, for sure.
Yes, well, that's true.
So, okay, so let's come back to your content marketing then, which is your newsletter, but you also, it doubles as your blog, if I'm remembering correctly, right?
Yes, it does. And I don't know when I made that shift exactly, but I am essentially writing a blog post once a month has been a good cadence. And then I put it in my newsletter. Sometimes I do a little intro that is more related to what's happening in the moment. Because I mean, I think about the blog as more evergreen. Somebody might look at them a year later. And I also just assume that not a lot of people are going to be clicking through to my blog post if I were to put a newsletter and then a separate blog post. So I figure, I mean, I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me where, I mean, and because I also sometimes circle back on LinkedIn, and this has happened to me many times where I'll put a blog post up. I put, like hours of thought and effort into it, and then I'll send it out, and somebody will respond like, "Oh, I really love that," and then like I'll reference it like a year later, and then that same person will be like, "Oh, this is a great article," like they didn't remember reading it a year ago, which
That's
is like,
right.
of course, I remembered that they said that, and
Mm.
it's just a good reminder that, like, first of all, it's okay to send things over and over because people aren't reading them, and even if they are, they apparently don't remember.
And actually, that reminds me of something. I think it was you who said this to me. And I think it's a really good marketing lesson that you didn't realize until you started doing it in your own marketing that basically I am just saying the same thing over and over in different ways.
Yeah, totally. I did think that recently about, I don't remember what it was that you posted, but yeah, I was like, huh, wow, just sort of the same thing, but in some different metaphors or some different, relevant content.
Yeah. And to me,
Sometimes
that's
it's differently depending on who you are. And sometimes you need to hear something 50 times before it lands.
totally, totally. And I think the important point in that insight to me was that before you had started doing it for yourself and figuring it out for yourself, you had the impression that I was basically, putting out all this content. And how could you come up with so many new ideas so
Right.
often? Right. But
Yeah. And I think the other piece of it too is that, like, when I think about my content, right? So, for instance, this is a really basic example, but it's like, oh, you really have to think about your audience and where they are, and that they're coming to your content like when they're part of a busy day. Like, that's an example of something I might tell my clients while I'm working with them. So, to me, that's just because I do it day in and day out and think about that day in and day out. It just seems so obvious that I'm like, am I really going to put this in a newsletter? And am I really going to repeat it?
right.
But then I will, and people will be like, "Oh, that's such a great point," you know. And
Mhm.
it's just that, like, yeah, like you're thinking about it all the time as the content creator, but the people reading it have a lot of other messages that are coming at them.
Exactly. And that was also the point of this newsletter that I love so much, and the way you made that point, which I'm sure you'll make over and over and over in many different ways, maybe using all different animals. That would be really fun. But shoot, I forgot where I was going with that sentence because that wasn't the end of it, but that's okay. I think, the idea of essentially knowing what your message is, knowing what the market needs to hear, and then finding different ways to say it so that when the timing is right, it lands and they respond. And you've told me that your content marketing is very effective and that people like it, they find it, they reach out to you, they say, "Oh my God, I love the way you're thinking about this. Let's talk."
Yeah. I mean, and that's why, going back to why I love writing now, because I I try to write just like what really is inspiring me in the moment. I mean, I tie it back to marketing, obviously, I mean, to my work, but I really try to start with the seed of like what's feeling alive for me right now and leaning into that, because two things. One is then I want to write. And I often set a timer for myself, like write for 20 minutes. I mean, I can write a lot in 20 minutes about a topic.
Hmm.
And it's fun. And then, I edit it and make sure there's some relevant stuff in there. But if the core of it is like really true to who I am and how I see the world and my heart, like actually just as honest as I can be,
Yeah.
which I do think is like I think that's something that good writers is very honest. And I don't think it's
Hmm.
very easy, actually. I think it's something
Hmm.
that like you have to keep working on. So I'm not saying I'm great at it, but I try.
Hmm.
But I had years ago, I mean, people do respond to my content, but I had this amazing client because I just wrote about something that was kind of esoteric and it was important to me. And somebody reached out on LinkedIn and said, "Gosh, like I loved this post. Like this is exactly how I think about our work. Like, will you work with us?" And they became a really great client. So yeah, it's like that bat signal idea that like
Hmm.
I say something that is true to me and it's gonna resonate with somebody for sure. And that person, as long as they can find it, will be my perfect client. And then we're already aligned before we even start working together.
Exactly. They're primed. And also, what you're saying there is that one person might find it, maybe two or three, but not thousands. It doesn't need to go viral. I
Oh,
I
right.
am pretty sure you're not looking at the vanity metrics the way, "Oh my God, nobody liked my post or nobody shared my post," and all of this, I mean, whining, truthfully, that I hear a lot about just what I consider to be not all that important, because clearly what people respond to is honesty.
Well, yeah. And I think the other thing too is that, like, I mean, in regards to those things, is that I just don't know when people are paying attention to your stuff. Like, I recently was talking to a current client, a new client, and I had posted something on LinkedIn about my daughter or something, and they didn't like it. I literally never seen them write anything like any of I have no relationship with them on LinkedIn whatsoever. I didn't even know that they knew I was on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? Because some people
Hmm.
aren't. And so she referenced it during the call. "Oh, I saw you post about your daughter, blah, blah." And I thought, gosh, yeah, you just don't know.
That's right. We don't
Yeah.
know. And it also makes me want to ask you then, because we're talking about honesty and authenticity in your writing, and so many people are using AI for their writing. I'm curious how or whether you are with these posts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm very interested in how people are using it, because there's kind of like different ways that it will plug in. I generally use it to organize my thinking. The feeling and the process of writing is so wonderful that AI doing it for me is like being like, AI will drink my cup of coffee for me. Like, what does that mean? Like,
Yes.
please don't. So the idea generation, the thoughts, the feelings that all come out and flow. I love to do that. And then, sometimes I'll do a lot of structuring and organization and then I'll run it through AI just to see, like, sometimes it just has better ways of kind of putting things together, and I'll pull some of those in. So it's like a light touch. And other times I actually will use it a little more heavily to organize the thinking. So if I have like a bunch of different concepts, then, although I find if I do that a lot, like, I don't know. There's just this kind of like AI voice from ChatGPT anyway that tends to come out that I
Hmm.
don't like. So
And that we might not call authentic.
yeah, definitely not. But it's also like, I guess the tricky thing though is that if it makes things clearer though, that's helpful.
Hmm.
Because like, I mean, my most authentic, like my text messages to my mom are going to be very authentic, but I mean, aside from the content, like they're not well structured to be understood. And so
Hmm.
there's that clarity piece too that I think
Right.
I can sometimes help with.
I think that makes sense. And so let's talk about this. issue, this newsletter issue that I love called Impact Reports in the Wild. And I will read it aloud, and perhaps I already have read it aloud and the listeners have heard it and they know what my animal reference was. But just tell me, what were you trying to do in this issue? How did you write it? How long did it take? How are people respond? Do people love it as much as I do?
So, okay. I was inspired by a writing prompt, which was like kind of like pretend that you're drunk at a bar at 3 a.m. and just like write what you really think about the thing. And since I've been doing a lot of impact reports, I thought, oh, okay, let's just do that. And it was sort of challenging to really lean into like, I'm not going to say this is critical, but it is a little bit like, hey, you need to think about what's really happening on the other person's end, right? Like I mentioned before, the audience's end, who's reading it. But it was fun, actually. It was really fun. And I wrote it, as I usually do, in one sitting, and then went back and tried to lean in even further into those points. Like no one's paying attention, and everyone's like jerking all over the place trying to. And I was also at the same time reading the book The Siren's Call, which is all about the attention economy. So it basically was just doubling down on the same message.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I love that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, I received some positive feedback from it, but I mean, I feel most of my content, like I get a couple of people saying, "Oh yeah, that really resonated," but it isn't often until later that I hear that people even read it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that one in particular, I think it's chunked so nicely in a couple different sections that you could easily repurpose it for LinkedIn, not only as a LinkedIn newsletter, but also just as like, here are the tips for what to do, because nobody is reading the way you wrote it, right? Or meant for them to read it. Or even that one little thing with the monkey, I think, you could just have a really cool, almost completely image oriented post.
Yeah.
With a question that people could engage with.
Well, and I really tried to have like a point of view with this one. I've been thinking about that a lot. Having a stronger, especially with all this AI content out there right now. And it's a little hard for me to have a strong point of view. Like, it's not my natural inclination per se to well, that's why with the being drunk thing was sort of helpful. I'm like, oh, let's give myself a little permission here. Like, let's take away some of that inhibition of trying to say the perfect buttoned up, but also authentic thing, And so, and it was fun. And honestly, like my favorite content is just people taking a strong point of view. So
yeah, I think that's a really important point, actually. So that's a good segue to my last question, which is, what baby step would you suggest our listeners can take if they want to do what you're doing? And maybe that means taking a strong point of view or anything else we've talked about.
Yeah. So I think I would say, again, I guess what I said earlier, which is sort of like doing what you love. I've had a lot of clients over the years who wanted to start blogs. And my advice to them was always like, well, do you write already? Do you love writing? And they'd be like, no. And I would, and some of them do, but the ones that are successful are the people who want to do that anyway. And so I think like finding your entry point, for me, a lot of times it was making the images too. Like that would really motivate me to start some ideas because I'm a very image oriented or visual person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So whether it's like, I mean, some people really don't like talking to people, it's like, so, okay, you have to do that maybe sometimes, but don't start there, start with what feels good and easy and what you already love.
I love that. Thank you. All right, Kate. Well, this has been another excellent conversation, as all of ours are. I just really appreciate how you seem to bring out the best in me. I love that.
Likewise, Elise.
Thank you. And tell the people where they can find you online and your newsletter and maybe even on LinkedIn.
Okay, yes. kpcreativestrategy.com is the email and the business. And on LinkedIn, I'm Kate Purcell. And I believe that the I don't even know, Elise, if I have a newsletter sign up on my website. Well, maybe I'll get one by the time this goes.
Sounds good. Because otherwise, your newsletter, actually, that's another question. You don't have to give us specifics, but approximately how many people get your newsletter? Are we talking 100,000?
No. Yeah, a few hundred.
A few hundred. Okay. And that's plenty, right? And you put those people on because they're in your circle.
Yes. I mean, I always get explicit permission. And it's usually somebody that I already know and I've had a conversation with. So it's high quality. Yeah. And I mean, that's great because I have gotten several clients from my newsletter who've said, "Oh, I've been following your stuff and I know you and now I'm ready to work together."
Newsletter magic. That's what we call that. All right. Beautiful. Thank you, Kate, so much. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks, Lise.
I just love talking to Kate, and it really is a thrill to watch her business grow as she implements the simplest marketing tools. And her baby step is perfect advice. She said, when it comes to your own marketing, do what you love, because that's what you'll actually do. So for this designer, it's writing. But what is it for you? Can you find your own entry point into your own marketing? And if you want my help figuring all of this out, I hope you'll take advantage of my free mentoring session. You can find that and lots more resources, including my simplest marketing plan at marketing-mentor.com. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.